Welcome. My name is Todd Neller, and in this video, what I'm going to do is overview what I have learned in recent years about Magic the Gathering for beginners with a focus on budget play of Magic the Gathering. Now, things change, prices change, circumstances change, so this is an update to the one that I did last year, and there are a few things that are different. But here's the best of what I've learned about budget play of Magic the Gathering in the year 2020. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delve into a question of why I personally, as a game enthusiast, nonetheless avoided Magic for its first 25 years. I was a new graduate student in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1993, so I was at one of the ground zeros of enthusiasm for this game. But I very quickly became convinced that this was a pay-to-win game. It was a money pit. I observed lots of money being spent on the more rare cards that would be necessary to have a competitive deck. So the question that I start out with is, well, what changed my perceptions of Magic the Gathering? And what, through my learning experiences in recent years, have I learned to be the highest value purchases and the things that I would recommend the most for the beginner? So let's start out with why I perceived it. So the perception. Let's take a look at what on August 26th of this year was the MTG Goldfish estimation of the metagame for standard format. Now, a metagame, for people new to Magic, is basically a breakdown of what types of decks people are playing. And here we can see that the most popular deck to play at this point in standard format, which draws from at most the last 2 years of cards, is one called Sultai Control. And that deck costs about $571 in cards. That's a lot to pay for a 60-card deck. And on you can see 534, 292. The least expensive of these is $93 for mono red aggro. But you can see that the one that is in highest demand at the top of the meta is 571. Think supply and demand. If there's high demand for a deck, there's high demand for its cards. There is a fixed supply of such cards. Therefore, the price of those cards goes up. And this is the standard format. But the standard format is only one of many competitive formats that exist for Magic the Gathering. So let's look at one that reaches back considerably farther in Magic's history. We look at what's called the modern format. Modern format goes back to 8th edition in 2003 and includes most of the cards that have been published since that time. And both standard and modern and other formats often have what are called ban lists. That is, cards that were deemed too powerful, that made for a metagame that lacked diversity. And so but modern draws from very many cards over very many years. And you can see that the most popular deck as of August 26th in this year was Uro Piles for $1,218. And you can see similar several $100 prices for other decks in the modern format. Moving on, Commander format. Commander allows for an even broader selection of cards, has other restrictions, such as only allowing one copy of each card in a game. And so we see here that nonetheless we have very expensive decks. The top 4 are hovering around $1,000 a deck. And we look at another format. This format allows most cards that have ever been printed, and that is legacy format. So at one point there was a division of cards into type 1, type 2, and type 1.5, I believe was termed Legacy, and you can see these go back even farther in Magic's history, and you can see that these the top 4 hover around $3,000-$4,000 for a deck. And the least restrictive format in terms of including the most cards from Magic's history are vintage format. And you read those numbers, right? You have the right number of digits. Those are 5-digit prices for dollars. We're talking about 30,000 plus for the top 3 decks in vintage. And that's a lot. So just to summarize here, averaging the prices for the top 8 most popular decks listed as the metagame on MTG Goldfish for August 26th of 2020, we have the average price for standard format being $345, double that for modern, go another couple hundred up to $904 for the average for Commander, over $3,000 average for Legacy, over $33,000 average for Vintage. And I think that you can understand why, looking at these competitive formats, that across the years I have had no desire to get into this game. I enjoy games very much, but I'm not going to spend that much money on any single game. So something that struck me in a game design talk by Mark Rosewater. In 2003, he was promoted from research and development in for Magic the Gathering at Wizards of the Coast to being the head designer of Magic the Gathering. And so at this talk that I have linked here, that was at the Game Developers Conference in 2016, he had a lot of wisdom to share about game design in general, things that he had gleaned from his experiences with Magic the Gathering and beyond. And one lesson of the 20 lessons that he offered really stuck out to me, and that was lesson 18, restrictions breed creativity. And being an enthusiast for budget Magic, I realized that this could translate to a specific application for my interests, namely that cost restrictions breed affordable creativity. So one question is, what's an easy, cost-restrictive Magic the Gathering game format that is low budget and nonetheless breeds creativity? Well, there are a couple of solutions to this. One of these solutions is called Pauper format. Now you look at the same metagame information from MTG Goldfish, and you'll see that the most popular decks are all less than $100. Now I'm not saying that this is a small amount of money. If you're brand new to the game, you probably don't want to be putting out that much money, but people will put out $30, $40 for a new board game. So now we're starting to get into the ballpark of what a person generally expects to pay for a new game. But mind you, this is just one deck, one 60-card deck, but still the prices contrast significantly from those that we saw for other formats. Now, what Pauper format is a restriction to only those cards that are commons, that is, that are produced at common rarity. They're the greatest frequency. So you open a booster pack, and most booster packs in recent years have 10 commons, 3 uncommons, a rare or a rare called a mythic rare, and some token card or special land card included. But basically 14 playable cards, of which 10 of which are commons. So you can see that with supply and demand, Pauper gives a great contrast in price to other formats. Pauper includes cards throughout Magic's history, except for a short ban list. So this is a format that's played often online, but it is still a lot to pay for a beginner that doesn't know whether or not they'll like the game. And so I'm going to spend a bit of time here talking about how to start learning Magic the Gathering for free, and then talk about some other budget decisions that one could make so as to get game equipment that enhances the experience, that preserves your cards, etc., without breaking the bank. So I have a link here down at the bottom of the page to a Google Doc that has links to some of my favorite starting places for learning about Magic and favorite resources. And so what you'll find here at that page, that there's also a video that I've made that talks through what's offered there, and there'll be some overlap between that video and this video. But I'm just going to give you some quick inroads to learning about the game to see whether or not you would want to play Pauper or any other budget format. So first, I recommend starting with videos that feature Jimmy Wong explaining the theme and flavor of Magic the Gathering, as well as some of the basic flow of the game and how it is that you go about building a deck and so on and so forth. So these introductory videos made by Wizards of the Coast are a good starting point. But one of the very best ways to learn these days is to actually download the free Magic the Gathering Arena application, which is now available as of this year for Mac and not just PC anymore. And this is a very well-polished interface. It has a built-in tutorial system. If you go through the tutorials, you get quite a number of free decks that you can practice with and play. And of course, one can pay money in order to get more expensive cards faster within the game. There are still rarities and those kinds of dynamics going on. But I have also found that this is a format, or that this is rather a game application where it is feasible to have an excellent experience as a free-to-play player. So I don't pay anything for the cards that I get in the game. And just by being a regular player, I find that it is completely feasible to get enough cards and wild cards to redeem for cards to build a collection of tier 1 decks that, as we saw in Standard, would be hundreds of dollars to get in paper. And it's feasible to get that for free playing the game on Arena. But for right now, for our focus right here, starting out, it's a great place to learn. So I recommend downloading and playing with Magic the Gathering Arena. And I think it's a great experience for a new player to start learning about how to play Magic. Now, it used to be that Wizards of the Coast would produce what were called welcome decks, free pairs of 30-card decks that could be mixed to make a 60-card deck that you would go to your local game store and be handed for free, and that you could learn with those. But they're no longer producing those. This year they have rolled out what they call the MTG Arena Starter Kit. This is a product that one can buy online, but I recommend supporting your local game store. Where is your local game store? Well, locator.wizards.com will point you at the closest place that you can find Magic the Gathering sold near you. I'm in Gettysburg, 17325 is the zip code, and I type that in, and sure enough, Four Corners Comics comes up, and they carry Arena starter kits as well. And what's good about these is that it gives you both face-to-face and digital options for learning to play the game with 2 pre-constructed decks. So for the cost of, it's in the ballpark of $10, I've seen variations above and below, you get 260 card decks on paper plus unlock codes for you and a friend to get those same 2 decks on Magic the Gathering Arena. And I think that that's also a great way to start out learning with a friend. I think that it's better than with the Magic the Gathering Arena starter bot called Sparky. I think that playing with a real person, and especially getting to talk with them, voice over IP, chat, whatever, that's going to be a better experience for people to be able to talk through what they're doing with each other. And that's not built into the arena. You'd have to use something like Discord for that. But anyhow, I recommend this budget purchase. And if you want to protect those cards, you can also at your game shop generally find the 2 most popular brands of card sleeves, Ultra Pro Eclipse and Dragon Shield. Recommendations and ratings for products can often be found on YouTube via the Tolarian Community College channel. Generally, you'll want to have a few accessories for both protecting what you have purchased and also keeping track of life total and the very common +1/+1 or -1/-1 counters that you are instructed to place onto cards. And there are a variety of ways of doing that kind of tallying. My favorite way of keeping track of life totals is to use a free app from Talisman Games called the Magic Life Total app. It's free. It has an intuitive interface. People also use pencil and paper and also spin down dice. For keeping track of +1/+1 counters or -1/-1 counters, using small 12mm D6 dice, you can get currently on Amazon, one can get a box of 36 for about $7. You can, for in the ballpark of $10, you can find play mats that are like oversized mouse pads. And if you want to have a deck box to protect your deck, there are inexpensive ones that are less than $2 each. So the accessories that one gets to play the game and to protect cards from damage and such don't have to be that expensive. So looking back at the Pauper format, I mentioned before the contents of a typical Magic the Gathering booster pack, and there is still the supply and demand dynamic here, where there are some cards that were printed at common rarity so that there are plenty of them out there, except there are many more Pauper players these days, and so the prices can sometimes climb higher, not nearly so high as for the non-commons, but since we're only focusing on those at common rarity, we generally have better prices than in other formats. And if one wants to put together a Pauper deck, then there are a number of places online where you can find a good market for such cards, in one of the popular places being tcgplayer.com. So the advantage is that this has the same enjoyment of any constructed format where you're trying to build creative decks and learn how to play them well, fine-tuning both the deck contents and your play of those contents. And this restriction to the rarity of the card to be common lowers the price. That's the advantage of the Pauper format. But the disadvantage of the Pauper format is the exact same disadvantage that's shared by all constructed formats and can be summarized with the words banned and restricted. Every so often, we will have, more frequently in recent years, the banned and restricted announcement from Wizards of the Coast. Now, I mentioned before that the metagame is a description of what proportion of players are playing different types of decks. And if you end up with too many people playing the same deck, it's referred to as an unhealthy meta or unhealthy metagame. And it is in cases like this that Wizards of the Coast sees a potential for dissatisfaction in a given format, that they step in and they either ban, that is, make it illegal to play such and such a card, or they restrict. Perhaps they restrict to only one copy in a deck, or make some other kind of restriction. But a banned and restricted announcement is made, and they address the problem that they see with the metagame by strategically banning or restricting the play of certain cards. And whether your deck is a $33,000 deck or whether your deck is a $60 deck, it's still a hard thing to accept that one's favorite deck to play, that one has put one's resources into and put one's practice and care, can be nerfed overnight with a banned and restricted announcement. This is becoming much more common in recent years as online forums and sharing of decks and such often accelerates the learning of best decks in new formats and the rush for people to play the same deck, what's called net decking, oftentimes because you're downloading your deck contents from the internet rather than designing it yourself. So then, for people who are frustrated with this, I'd say, well, what if you could decide which cards could be played in your playgroup? And I've thought this myself because I have quite a number of Pauper decks, and I have seen multiple times those Pauper decks require adjustment in order to stay Pauper legal. And I don't want to be constantly making updates to those decks. I'd rather enjoy learning more about the strategic play before that play changes. So what is it that we can do as players to have a budget, accessible way to play this game and yet not be at the mercy of Wizards of the Coast for deciding which cards we can and cannot play? And the answer is to get out of competitive formats and into casual formats. And there are a couple popular ones, but one that I'm going to focus on right here is a budget format called Cube. And with Cube, what you do is you have a play group that has a set of usually 360 or more cards that support a balance among colors and many different possible archetypes, that is, styles or themes of play in decks. Oftentimes, but not always, there's a restriction that's called Highlander, from the Highlander movie quote, "There can be only one." And so that makes sure that there is a diversity of cards that lead to a diversity of different drafted decks. And you can draft with any draft format that your group wants to. It could be a traditional draft in which you shuffle up the 360 plus cards and form 15 card booster packs for people to, quote, open and pass and draft in traditional format. Or one format that is enjoyed in my family a lot is the same format that's used for Magic the Gathering pre-release events in local game stores. That's called Sealed Limited, where you have a stack of 90 random cards from the cube, and you have some time to construct a 40-card deck from among those 90 cards, plus added lands. And you'll want to have, for a play group of 8 and 360-card cube, you'll want to include about 35 basic lands in each color for deck building for those 8 players. And I have another document in which I summarize the best of what I've found for cube play that you can be found at this URL, MTG Cube Resources. And so anyhow, I very much enjoy this format. But you'll also note as you look at some of the more popular Magic the Gathering cube sites that cubes can be very expensive. And so again, it begs the question, what is something that makes this affordable and accessible to all as a format for play? And the simple answer is limit your cubes to be designed with less expensive cards. And one way to do this is to buy a pre-constructed cube. Card Kingdom is an online retailer that has a former professional Magic player that puts together 360 card cubes. That I've played a couple of these, and the couple that I've played have been excellent. I've really enjoyed these, and so you can get a well-designed 360 card cube plus 35 of each basic land plus high-quality card sleeves to sleeve them all up for $100. Now, you can see in this screenshot right here that it's currently out of stock. And what I've observed for the past few years is what they'll do is they'll design a cube from their overstock. They will publish the cube list and have a bunch of these made. Usually, I don't know whether it's a fictitious number, but it's usually says that they have 100 in stock. And they make it very transparent what is in the cubes, and you can look at the design and analyze it on a site called Cube Cobra. But they give the sleeves for sleeving up all of these, and I just think that this is a fantastic value. If I were to recommend a single Magic the Gathering purchase for a player, the Card Kingdom Starter Cube is at the top of my list for replay value. So what if you want to go a different route? Well, here's another cube format that I have been developing, sort of experimenting with. One thing that I realized is that 93% of the cards opened in booster packs are commons and uncommons. Uncommons, of course, are less common than commons, but there are 3 of them in each booster pack. So they are out there in sufficient numbers that that they're not priced so much more. In fact, when new sets come out, the initial default prices are very often about 15 cents a common and 25 cents an uncommon, and the market oftentimes moves these numbers depending on how desirable the cards are or not. But that's just to give you an idea of relative scale of the prices for these. But if you consider that they are 93% of what people are opening up in their booster packs, then you have to conclude that each new set of Magic the Gathering cards are designed around the interactions of the commons and uncommons. I want to repeat that. This is very important to emphasize. Wizards of the Coast R&D, their designers, their design team, that are trying to craft a good play experience are focused on the commons and uncommons of a set because they're 93% of what people are going to be opening in their pre-release events. They're 93% of what people are going to be cracking in packs on Friday nights for Friday Night Magic. And because of this, they know that if those 93% don't form a foundation for a good play experience, then the set's going to be a failure. Now, taking that and noting that that 93% of cards are much cheaper than the other 7% that are being opened in packs, it is something that is not unfeasible to get 2 copies of each booster common and uncommon at a low price. And what I call this idea of taking all commons and uncommons of a set and getting 2 copies and calling that a cube, I refer to this as the artisan or peasant doubleton set cube. Now, doubleton refers to 2 times or 2 copies of each. Artisan is a Magic the Gathering arena turn. It encompasses all commons and uncommons that are playable in Magic the Gathering arena. But if you're looking beyond arena, farther back into Magic's history to cards that are not yet available on Magic the Gathering arena, people commonly refer to commons and uncommons as peasant. I actually like the term silver black, although it's not used very often. Silver black refers to the color coding that helps you see from the set symbol whether or not you're holding a common or uncommon. But whether you call it artisan or peasant or silver black, the idea is the same. We're talking about commons and uncommons. And if you want to experience what it's like to draft a set and you want to have that experience at a lower cost, then the way that I've found is great to go about it is to get 2 copies each and play that as a cube. So you can online oftentimes find lots of with four copies of each common and uncommon of a set, and I've been seeing prices hovering around $50 for recent sets. And so you can think of these as being 2 $25 small cubes. If you know somebody else who wants to do this, you get 4 copies, commons and uncommons, split the set in half, and you have 2 budget $25 cubes that in my experience are wonderfully playable. And you add 35 copies of each basic land. If you buy in bulk, I've been able to buy lands at about 2.5 cents each for 1,000 lands. And you can get penny sleeves if you don't want to go full high quality sleeves, and have yourself a sleeved cube for and with basic lands for an additional $10 for a cost of around $35 currently. So I think that that's pretty amazing that a person can put together a cube and have that kind of play value for that price. So I suggest this idea to you. Give it a try. You can also give it a try online. If you go to Cube Cobra, you can find some of the artisan or peasant cubes that I've created cube lists for. This is for the most recent set that was released, the Core 21 or Core 2021 set, code symbols M21. And I've played this a bunch in my family, and this is great fun. So you can take a cube ID from here and go into a site that is called Draft Info with a 4 in place of the A in draft.info, and can set up a very simple interface where people can do a traditional draft with each other and draft decks, which can then be copied and imported into Magic the Gathering Arena or free applications like untap.in or Cockatrace. And there are a number of different ways that people can take the deck lists that they have created from drafting on this site or other sites and then play those together online. So, in summary, I recommend that a new player, first of all, try for free. See if you like the game by downloading and playing Magic the Gathering Arena. If you want to explore further and you want to go beyond the free decks that you're offered there, and especially if you want to have fun learning with a friend, I recommend the Magic the Gathering Arena Starter Kit. And I think that the very best single purchase that a person can make that works out to $12.50 per person in a play group of 8 is a Card Kingdom Starter Cube. I think it's a fantastic value. If you want to focus in particular on specific sets that are released approximately quarterly, then I recommend the idea of 2 times each common and uncommon card of a set, creating an artisan or peasant doubleton set cube. And you can continue to learn through arena play, and there are also many YouTube and Twitch videos in which people share how they draft, show their tactics in playing the game. There's so much good stuff that's out there. But I hope that this video has provided you with a number of good starting points for your learning about the game and appreciating it in a good budget way. Now, one last addendum here. The Gettysburg College Game Club likes to play Commander format very commonly, and so a couple sites that they recommended for budget play of Commander are the Commander's Quarters and Budget MTG Decks. These are 2 links that if you go to the very beginning slide and use the QR code to get at the PDF of these slides, then you can use these links to find your way, or you can just search, these names, of course. But at any rate, I hope that this video has provided you with a great many resources for enjoying Budget Magic: The Gathering.